to what is the bench. So I'm just making sure that the dots and the dabs that I make here are following that ground line, which goes upwards slightly. Okay, I think that will be sufficient. You might find, I'm suspecting we'll end up coming back to these areas, obviously, and doing perhaps a little bit more dark inference down here of things. Now then, let's put some window panes in. So again, I want to make sure that this is dominated with the blue. In fact, this is where I'll use a little bit of cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is that little bit more opaque from ultramarine blue. And I like it for just hinting the windows and things like that. I will stick with my little pickle jar lid. Just cleaning the brush off slightly so that otherwise there's no point in picking up a different color blue if you're not going to allow it to register in the mix. So right at the edge again. So I'm careful not to take the cobalt blue into the previous little mix that I had on the go. Plenty of water for the moment. We can adjust this. And I just really want to hit out these shapes. It's almost the looser you paint these window panes, the better. They're not going to look like the window panes in the photo. Okay. I wouldn't want them to, because it's just what's happening in the photo, of course, is a bit too perfect. So we'll let that dry and we'll be doing a wash over those. So something like this. There's, if you look at the amount of window panes, I think there are 12. I'm doing 9 here. Just run a fingernail sometimes through a couple of those individual panes of glass. Perhaps that needs to be a bit bigger. Same again. I'm there's a real danger here of getting tight again. I tend to leave the sort of, if I interfere with these shapes at all of these window panes, it tends to be the bottom left corner that I don't complete the actual shape. Okay. So it will be that one there, sort of. And that's simply because I'm thinking the light is coming from the upper right. If any light's going to get to this recess, which is the window at all, it's probably going to be in the bottom left-hand corner. Barely see that window, so I'm not getting too fussy with that. So it all looks very stark, doesn't it? And very sort of, how would you describe it? I'd say sort of tight, a bit, even though we've worked quite loosely, I think it's still looking sort of tight and graphic. I think that's the word. So brush on its side like this. I'm just going to take that line down as we can see it against the wall, that little roof there. It's not in the photo, but I'm just going to come down this wall here. It's really odd, this space on the right-hand side. I think we'll end up probably, I'm imagining here, sorry, just a sort of downpipe coming down the wall. Yeah, I think we'll be playing this area down a little bit with shadow and other things. So what else can we crib from the photo? Just, there's a couple of other things. Show the back end of that bench off by going dark behind it a little bit like that. And something I spotted a moment ago. Something else. Just something up there in that corner. Put a little whatever these things are that appear halfway down these down pipes. I mean, you could take a little finger to that and hint upon a shadow, just a mark with your finger. Okay, I think it's time to probably speed dry this again. Even though that sticky paint does dry very quickly, I think it still needs to be really dry before we do what we want to do next. Just seeing a line here at the edge, just sort of as though at some point they've resurfaced this little path and left some joining lines in the mix. Right, okay. Yeah, I think it's time to now think about giving the roses some form, okay? Let me just speed dry it very quickly. So for the first time, we're actually using the biggest of the brushes. Now, it really is your call here, whether you want to use a large flat, 1-inch flat, or you want to use a large round brush. I'm going to go with the flat, as I often do on buildings. Actually, sorry, I'm jumping the gun here a little bit. I want to do something similar with greens in this territory here. So we'll go back to that round brush that we used for applying the flower color before we get back to the 1-inch flat. So I'm going to make some green. I'm going to use ultramarine blue here with some cadmium yellow, maybe a bit of phthalo green as well, actually. Some fresh phthalo green out. So if the flower color is warm, which it is, relatively speaking at least, then your greens shouldn't be warm, okay? If you make your greens warm, you'll end up with a very muddy effect. So it's very important that your green is a cool green, not a warm green. Now, if you're struggling to, understand the difference between, or you're not familiar visually with what is a warm green and what is a cool green, a warm green is going to come from adding certain yellows like raw sienna. Avoid raw sienna. That will always give you a warm green. You're better off using like a lemon yellow. It's not on the list, I know, but I'm just making this point. That's why I've put phthalo green on this list. It's because it's a cold green. Now you can put a little bit of cadmium yellow in that. It'll stay cold-ish. But the cadmium will, if you're not careful, add too much warmth to it. As I say, it's very important that when you're putting, because they're opposites, you see, greens and reds, let's call this area red for argument's sake. What we're applying on top of it is the opposite number on the color wheel is green. Now, that's why the green needs to be a cold green, not a warm green, because warm on warm will make for a very dirty, muddy looking painting. So I'm far more careful. I'm starting to tap here, as you can see, still holding the brush slightly different now. This gives me a little bit more control. The handle of the brush is now in this fleshy area between thumb and index finger, okay? still held very loosely, thumb here, middle finger there, still held loosely, and some gentle tapping like this will allow you to deliver that green, that cool green mix. Okay, again, I'm not too worried as to the color going astray, going halfway up the wall or whatever. What I am concerned with, as I say, is controlling the type of green, and this is why it's important to get to grips with some color theory to avoid to avoid muddy paintings. So let's go across the ground here. This time, let me just show you. There's my initial green, cold green mix. I've gone for a slightly warmer, and that's as warm as I dare go with this one here. So you can see the two differences. This is a warm green, that's a cold green. That's about as cold as a green can get. It's so green, it's almost blue. And there's that territory where green heads towards blue, until you end up with a very, you know, the blue, the cooler color of those is blue. So just tapping this out, just going along ground level like this. As I say, you don't need to worry about these little hits of paint going astray, because if you look at that foreground, there's weeds and everything coming up in the fissures and cracks of the concrete. So you'd expect there to be these colors running rife. In a moment, when I feel as I've done enough of this, we'll add some water. All the time though, and I want you to be thinking about this, folks, all the time remembering to leave white, okay? White is quite an important color at the moment in this painting, and I'm guessing we're going to probably still have a fair bit of it, or a bit of it at least, by the end of the painting, by the time the painting is finished. Okay, keep repeating this. Now, just as I did with the red, I'm just going to start placing some of this with the tip of the brush, slightly larger abstract shapes. There's a lot of it around ground level, I've noticed. And I'll just show you one thing I think would probably work here. Let me just deliver a bit of paint just there, right off the tip of the brush. Look, there's a little reservoir I've made of green just there with my finger, where my finger's pointed. Now, if you turn your brush around and use the handle, you can just scrape out, okay, a couple of those climbing edges, those leading tendrils, whatever you want to call them, of the plant itself. You can do that. Don't do too much of that. It could potentially look a little bit overdone. But, and if you do overdo it this stage, the good news is we can knock a little bit of it back anyway when we start putting a shaded wall back into the cottage. Right, that green is a little doesn't look right to me, the green that I've just put on, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of alizarin crimson, which again is its opposite number, but it's a cold red again, okay, not a warm red. So sticking with that, you know, thing of it being cool, and just drop that cold red into those things we've just been playing around with, and that should make those look a little more natural. Okay, do a little bit of that now over here. I think immediately behind the roof, the lean-to, this porch area, there's a lot of dark there, as you'd expect it, because it's in shadow from this structure. So that immediate edge there is quite dark. Notice that I'm going to do the same with the brush handle here. Notice some of that rose is climbing up over the wall there. Do like a challenge. gets you really inventive and creative. It just gets the creative brain out, and makes you work a little bit harder. Okay, so because we don't really have a reference for this side, this rose, because it's not there, is it? It doesn't really exist. So we're gonna have to get a little bit more inventive. Slightly less detail though than the right-hand side, I think. More shadowy. So I'm just softening some of that with my fingertip, as I would over there, sort of clone, to deliver some paint like this, okay, with the brush, and then with the ball of your finger, you can sort of clone a softer version of the right-hand side of what's going on. Right, okay, I think it's probably time to speed dry again now. I'm just gonna, if I feel as though too much paint anywhere, just take a little bit of tissue again, lift off. I probably didn't complete what I was doing along the ground level, so let me just put a bit more of that in. That was that slightly warmer green. Let's get a little more adventurous here. Let's go a little bit wilder and just skim and dance over the surface here, across the floor as the weeds come through here. Again, I'm really fighting off this tight and we'll even put a little bit of slightly weaker watery green off the brush here like this. Of course, every brush mark I make now, I'm forfeiting the original flower color. So just got to make sure you know when to stop. Okay, I think note to self here, note to Howard, I think it's time you stop doing that. Let's put that brush down for a moment. Give it a clean off. Let's speed dry. Just noticed something really important. For some reason, I've left the color out of this wall here. So let's just get a little bit of that yellow. I'll put a little bit of the yellow, a little bit of the alizarin crimson, and we'll just warm up. That happens. It's a bit like, and I'm always warning other people of this, it's a bit like when you're painting a bridge, maybe it's a bridge over a river or something like that. It's such a commonplace thing to forget to paint the gap through the bridge. There we are.